Alright, I'm here in the DCS version of the F-5E Tiger II. I'm getting ready to start it up to go on basically a scramble mission to intercept an probable Russian Su-27 flanker. And it's not just a scramble to intercept it to find out who he is or anything. It's actually a scramble to a known bogey to see if to shoot him down. So anyway, I'm going to start it up. Not sure what I'm doing at this point. Just staring off into space. Actually, I'm trying to figure out how to start this thing up. What I really need to do is to get a better, more scripted, or at least have notes to narrate as I'm going along to start this thing up. Taking a look on the outside, doing the beauty pan. Oh, loading up ordnance, selecting AIM-9 key 5, which apparently is a forward firing or a forwarded targeting capable sidewinder, capable of attacking at all aspects, like the AIM-9L and AIM-9N or M. And a single, what is it, a 275 millimeter or milliliter single centerline hard tank. Okay, once that's all loaded up, then I'm going on to request electric power to be turned on, and then requesting that the ground air supply be connected up.
Copy. Ground air supply is now connected.
Well, at least the ground power at this point. Now I'm looking at the cockpit. Okay, I'm tuning in the UHF radio frequency for this airfield and the TACAN channel for the TACAN on the airfield. Turning on the battery, turning on the navigation lights, right, turning on the radio to both. That means one of them is automatically guard, it's guard reception, and I think guard reception only, and transmit and receive on the tuned in frequency. Turning on the fuel pumps on the wing tanks, or just the only fuel tanks it has. I'm requesting to start the engine. We'll start with the left. I turn on the beacon. The beacon indicates you're imminently or have already started your engine. Well, imminently about to start your engines. Usually it's running while the engine's running. Going back to ground crew, have them initiate the airflow for the left engine. I'm waiting it to come up about 10% or so, because I don't remember what the actual manual requirement was for it. Then I throw the left throttle into the flight idle position or idle position and hit that button, the left button on the left lower panel, the engine start button, and wait for it to wind up until it catches on its own. And then I'll do the same thing for the right engine. Initiate airflow. When I get to 10%, initiate a right throttle forward to idle, and then press the right start button. Once that's all done, then we'll go ahead and disconnect. Oh no, okay, now we're going for the airflow. So the engines are started. I do not need to have the air supply hose connected or the electrical power cable connected. Ground power cable can be all disconnected. Stow all that. Start setting up the jet for flight. So some of these scenes I'm just kind of looking around trying to figure out what to do because I haven't flown this jet in a while. Now I'm tuning in 12100. It's a VFR squawk code. Probably not what you would see on a jet fighter, but well, whatever. Turned on the oxygen. Centerline fuel tank is on, by the way. Turning on the TAC and to receive and transmit so that I can check my indicator to make sure that it's detecting the TACAN, the right TACAN, and the bearing and range are working. Turning the radar into standby, turning the pitch and yaw dampers on for the flight control stability system. Turn on the HUD. Sternal nav lights are flashing. Because you can tune it from flashing to steady apparently. The auxiliary intake doors are open. Taking care of flight control services to make sure they're all working. Retract the air brake. Check the flaps. Check the rudder. Leading edge flaps and trailing edge flaps are working. In DCS, it's actually kind of critical to check that too because they always update the flight controls and blow out your hard worked on previously saved flight controls. So you wind up having to redo it. You don't save it and back it up. Or maybe you just haven't loaded it up again from the last update that they blew out. So that seems to be a recurring problem with DCS. Keep doing that. What am I doing? Checking something? I don't know. Looking around. Well, obviously I'm checking something, but I'm looking around. Okay, I'm tuning in the runway heading for the course of the TACAN. So I'm putting in course 250 for the runway 250, though it probably isn't in real life literally 250. It's probably off by a couple of degrees or so. And I'm adjusting the pitch trim, the top little dial up there, all the way up to maximum because it doesn't seem to have that much effect when it's on the ground, even with full flaps. Looking everything over again. Shows lack of confidence. Adjusting the flap control handle in the different settings, seeing what it's indicating. Full transition up. Okay. I believe I took off with it in auto, but I'm not sure. It might not have been. It might have just been in half flaps or whatever it's called, fixed flaps. Not sure how that works really. Even after reading it, I'm not really sure what it does. It just moves on its own, but what's the difference between that and auto? Not sure. Checking things over. Okay. I failed to do something here. I failed to turn the altimeter from pneumatic to electric. Yep, so I forgot to do that part. Maybe I'll get to that when I get to the runway. So I'm doing a brake check. That's what they really do, usually. They haven't done it before, I guess. They usually move up a little bit, check the brake, make sure it's working, but they also check it for leaks in the gear and stuff like that. So the ground crew will usually go under the aircraft and look at the gear and stuff and see if there are any leaks developing as a result of that little check. Although this may not actually happen during a live scramble. That might be only for normal training mission stuff or anything not really involving an actual emergency. Whereas this would probably be an emergency, being a scramble and stuff. Okay, now it's time to taxi, call the tower and taxi out for departure, although I think I already did it anyway, so it's too late. Checking the gear steering, moving it a little bit left and right. Now we're going to go out to the hold short line of runway 25 and finish setting up the jet for the final, for the takeoff. Final checks. Normally, I believe an actual hold short line on any normal runway in the United States would be 100 feet away from the edge of the runway. So then I start finishing up the setup, turning on the chaff and flares. Radar is turned on now. Turning on the Sidewinder power. I guess then I decided to turn it off because I figured I'm going to probably have to jettison the fuel tank in the center line, so I don't know what it would do, but I don't want to find out that I'm jettisoning my fuel tank and my Sidewinder, so I turned off the Sidewinders. Check everything over. Close the canopy. I'll turn on the squawk code to normal. Turn on mode 4, which I guess would only be for encrypted codes between me and a AWACS or a CRC. Once over, now I'm satisfied, I'm ready to go. Call the tower for departure. Once I get that, well, I guess in this particular case I should have realized there's my altimeter setting in inches of mercury. I look at my altimeter and I realize I need to set it to electric. It's set, and then set the altimeter to 3038. That's done. Give it one more look over. Get out on the runway, line up, and wait. Not for a takeoff clearance, but actually line up, not really wait, but line up. Get it lined up, stop, and then run up the engine. Well, actually the last thing would be hiking the nose gear before I run up the engine. I'll hike the nose gear once I've stopped. Although I hear you don't really have to go out there then hike it, you can just do it, but whatever. Here I am, gear is up, flaps are set, run up the engines to 90%. And then hold them there and see if they break. Although since the game is just a game and it's not a real aircraft and I don't have any malfunctions set into it, it's probably not going to break. And once I'm satisfied there are no caution lights or anything, then I'll let go of the pedals, put it to full military power, and then to full afterburner power once I've made sure that I have control over the direction of flight, or rather steering on the ground. Wait for 150. and try to pull it off the runway as smoothly as I can. Climb as smoothly as I can. Raise the gear and the flaps into auto. I'm going to accelerate out to 350 knots in afterburner before I disengage the afterburner. That was something a P-38 instructor pilot told me they would do, go to 350 in afterburner before coming out. I'm going to mainly kind of head up to 10,000 at this point. I'm going to have to switch over to the E2 Hawkeye for direction as to any targets where they are. So I'll be switching to 251.0 momentarily. I've also turned on the TAC end, I've turned the volume down so I don't have to keep listening to that. Sometimes it's a little glitchy in the game. It seemed to work for me to turn it all the way up and then all the way down after it started beeping. And that seemed to get rid of it. Coming up through 8300, switching the frequency. Check in with the Hawkeye and see what's going on. So the Hawkeye is given its own position report first, and then I call in for a picture request. So it says there's a target at Bullseye, 240 at 45. That doesn't help me unless I really know where I am in relationship to the Bullseye. So a bra report is better, 263 for 35 at 25,000. Or Angels 25, hot, Angels 25. Coming at me. Generally noses on. Basically anywhere within I guess 45 degrees left or right of the target would be hot versus neutral. Looks like he's climbing up to 30,000. That's good. He's getting into the contrails. That's awesome. And as you can see, slightly off to the right below my aircraft, you can see a contrail. Yay, it's easy. The radar in the F-5, as you might already know, or you don't know, I don't know. Yeah, I forgot to turn on the P-dot tube, or the P-dot heat. You know, that can affect your airspeed indication. Then I turned on the engine also because the engine heat, because I started having issues with the afterburner. After I came out of afterburner and then I got up higher and I wanted to accelerate into afterburner again, as you see now, I'm having issues with it. It's not working. So I just decelerate all the way down to idle and then reaccelerate from military and then back into afterburner, and then they start responding. I can tell that because of the nozzles. The nozzles were not moving. So now the nozzles are functioning. Now it's acting correctly. I don't know if that's a glitch or a modeled feature that actually exists in the real jet. I don't know if that's because I didn't have the hot heat on or the engine heat on. I'm not sure. So anyway, here I got the radar going here to lock up the guy. I had him locked up, and I'm so distracted in the cockpit with this flight that I'm not really paying attention as much as I could to the target. He's already diverted off to the upper right of my quadrant. So I'm following him up. Got a tone. I launched my second Sidewinder and it hit him, shockingly. He's in flames and destroyed. I was pretty surprised that I even accomplished this. I thought it was just going to miss, so I'm happy. Now I throw it into idle so I don't accelerate myself right into the ocean. Throw out the speed brake and just kind of watch him and follow him down. Probably not what you would do in real life, because you'd probably have more than one enemy or potential for another enemy. You want to make sure you're looking out for that rather than being mesmerized on your target like I am. But it's so beautiful, and I just had to follow it down. Into the water he goes. I know he's gone, I know there's no others, but I'm just going to play the part. I'm going to pull out of my nosedive, try to orient myself as to where I am and where I want to go, and let's decide, hey, let's just play this through, and I'll call up the E2 and ask for another picture check. You got any more out there? Of course he comes back and says he doesn't. So now I'm a little bit disoriented because I'm just using what I see out the window as to where I am. And this weather, the low fog on the ground is making it look a little different. Not exactly sure where I'm going. I'm not looking at the compass that well. Not really trying very hard to get my bearing at this point. So I switch back to base. Once I'm done working with the E2 and I'm satisfied. This is probably not real. I mean, you'd have to literally check out. I mean, in real life, you'd be checking out from the E2 at a designated location and switching up to ATC only when you got to a particular place where you're supposed to coordinate for that, unless there's something dynamic going on that would change where that would happen due to some really bad stuff going on, but that's not happening here. So probably if everything was copacetic, you wouldn't do that. You just go to where it's supposed to go, check in with or check out with your POC E2 and check in with ATC. There might be different layers you have to go through to get back home, but this is just a real simple one. One layer, you go from your E2 back to ATC, and then you start taking normal ATC instructions back to base. Calling up ATC to get an inbound, looking for a vector. The only problem with this game that's not very realistic is you'd get a vector all right, but usually wouldn't be left on one vector for the rest of the flight. The whole point of ATC is to guide you into and put you onto final approach in an IFR approach situation. So they give you vectors and altitudes, and they might even give you airspeed as well. And their goal is to get you as a radar control. Their goal is to, as an approach, let's say, or even a center, but I don't think they'd have a center out here to work with you in a combat environment. But in a radar approach control, which would be the layer just above the tower, they would get you in to a radar traffic pattern normally, unless, like I said, unless war changes things and they can't do the normal stuff, or they have to change to something different, direct you somewhere else. But ultimately what these guys in the radar approach are doing is bringing you in, handing you off to a rival. They'd hand you off to another controller who would be operating what they call an arrival scope. This would be like maybe 20 miles out, so from like 60 miles into about 20 miles, the approach controller would vector you in altitudes and headings. And then from that point, they'd hand you off to the arrival controller. The arrival controller's job would be to get you onto final approach, get you into position lined up in the right place in relationship to the runway, and heading in a way that is hopefully no more than 30 degrees off of the heading of the runway. And at that point, you would either take an ILS in, and you could remain with the approach controller all the way to touchdown, or they could also switch you off to the tower depending on type of aircraft and the circumstances and the procedures of that airfield you're working on. I know that some aircraft that I've dealt with they would stay on the radar final controller all the way down the ILS and talking to that person, or not talking to them rather, and have to receive their landing clearance from the radar final controller even though they were doing an ILS. It doesn't have to be that way. They could switch the aircraft off to the tower at like 15 miles or so, and they could fly their whole ILS in and get their clearances and stuff like that to land from the tower. And then if you talk about a PAR, Precision Arrival Radar, PAR, that's a whole nother deal. That's also another form of approach control, final approach rather, where the arrival controller would take you down to a specific spot, aiming for a specific spot within a certain less than 30-degree heading off of the end of the runway at about 15 miles or so. And then when you get to about 10 miles, I guess, I don't remember, it's been a while since I've done one, but about 10 miles or so, you're supposed to start intercepting the PAR glide slope and glide path, and that's where the pilot shuts up and the PAR controller is supposed to give them their position and specific headings and instructions that you're either above course, on glide path, above glide path, below glide path, on glide path, slightly above, slightly below, and they start giving you little course changes to try to keep you on the radar final approach. The controller has literally a little line that goes down scope for the course, and another little line that, or thing that shows the glide path coming down, and they just give you they tell you where you are, either course heading changes or above or below glide path, and let the pilot kind of adjust their glide path on their own. No specific information, just you're like above, you're below, or slightly above, slightly below, you're trending up or you're trending down and stuff. And the pilot has to make their own call as to how much of a movement to make to try to get back up, and the control will just keep talking until they start trending towards the middle, and hopefully get on center and hold it, or rather the glide path. And then the course changes left or right would be a couple degrees, 3-degree changes, and then try to get you on the center line of the runway. And they'd take you down, they'll try to take you all the way down to the runway. They'll still call out stuff, but at some point the pilot's no doubt can either see the runway and land, or they're not going to see the runway and they're going to be outside of their minimums and go around. This is totally a VFR operation, really. I mean, they only get you in on this game, hopefully, to a point where you can visually see the airfield. And at that point, you really are just doing a visual approach to land. So you're not getting any precision anything out of this, except maybe off of your own instrument landing system, which would be TACAN in this case. It's about as good as it gets. Some aircraft might have ILS, but this certainly does not. It's got a TACAN. All you get out of this thing is course. If you have it lined up correctly for your runway you're landing to, it'll give you that. The one thing that this is missing that you would have to correctly do this is a TACAN approach plate that gives you all the descent information that you don't have in this game to actually do something like this correctly. Of course, that's even assuming that this airfield was ever curbed out by U.S. military or somebody who knows what they're doing, so that there would be an instrument approach for this airfield. And because, again, I'm way behind the jet, not enough practice, haven't flown fixed-wing jets very much lately, so I wind up kind of taking too much runway to get down to the ground. So I decided before I even touched the ground that I was going to go up to military power or afterburner power and go back up, make left close traffic, try it again. Try to take it up to about maybe 1500 AGL. Then I'm going to go downwind, and when the runway approach in is approximately aligned with the approach in, the leading edge of the wing, then I'll begin my turn into base, final, and land. Also started turning off some of the unnecessary systems on the jet while I was making the approach into the airfield, several miles back. And by the way, if you don't already know it, I'm using the HP Reverb G2 VR headset while I'm flying this mission. I had the Oculus CV1 and then the Oculus Rift S. I actually didn't like the Rift S as much. I preferred the ability to physically and mechanically change the spacing of the eyepieces on the CV1. The Oculus Rift S is fixed and doesn't really work for somebody that has a wide distance between pupils. So I spit out the chute. It's pretty effective. Just kind of let it ride in. I'm not really trying to use brakes or anything. Just kind of let the chute slow me down. And then I'm going to drag the chute off the runway because it wouldn't be very courteous for the next guy if I just dump my chute on the runway like this. So I'm going to do something that the DCS AI never does and take an intersection taxiway off the runway. Like the AI always rolls out to the end of the runway before they ever leave. Before they get out of the way. It'd be nice if AI was a little smarter than that on DCS. They could do that if they would just realize what taxi speed is, or just arbitrarily decide what a taxi speed is, and then say, okay, once you get that, if you're not too, you're not, whatever you're past, of course you're past, but if you got another intersection coming up, take it. That's what a real pilot would probably do, unless it was some reason they couldn't and they were told to roll to the end. Or maybe they had to go to a de-arming spot. That's a possibility too. It's hard to keep this thing going straight on the taxiway. It may be that just in real life they would never do that when they're taxiing in like this for that very reason. I don't know. Some airplanes you can, some airplanes you can't. Might be the difference between a heavy and a fighter, or having a co-pilot or not. Taking it all the way to the parking, where I intend to shut it down and end the video in the cold and dark state. Leave it like you find it. Try to check your crossing taxiways as you're going down the parallel so you don't have any accidents with anything. Not just other aircraft, but it could be vehicles, personnel, FOD, anything. Cows, that can happen too. Usually when they park, they have to run through some systems, and ground crew guys got to do some stuff. Put the chalk in for one. Got to turn off my light, my nose wheel steering light. There we go. Should have done that to indicate to the ground crew that I was done moving, that they could chalk it up. Checking everything to make sure it's off. Sure I missed something on this. I'm always pleasantly surprised when you record a mission and it actually records and doesn't go off doing something bizarre, shooting at empty sky or something. Alright guys, well, I think I'm done here on this mission. Oh, I guess I still have to turn off the batteries and some of the other systems. There we go, almost done. And then finally the battery. Have a good day.